Are we live? Are we live? I think we are live. All right. Hello, thinkers. Welcome back to the Apex Mind. This is going to be a very short live, and the reason I decided to do this live was because I wanted to do it in one go. Firstly, and secondly, because if someone if some people had questions regards to what I'm going to say, I can see them live rather than having to sort through the comments. So I can do it right now. All right, this is going to be a very short live in which I am going to discuss my understanding of ethics and give you a cheat sheet in understanding all forms of ethics and all the whole mumbo jumbo that people talk about, and to simplify it, at least give you some form of an understanding of what ethics is, right? Okay, let's go. Let's see if this is visible. I think it is. And I need to flip the camera also to make sure that you guys can see things the way can see them. All right. Very clear, very nicely done. Okay. So, when you're trying to understand morality or when you're trying to understand ethics, the central pillars of what all ethical theory, everything about ethics stands on, is the conception of these two things: right and wrong. Now, right and wrong are two things that we consider when we talk about ethics. So, what is ethics or what is morality or ethics? It is the field of philosophy which deals with what is right or what is wrong. Every ethical theory, every form of ethics, every morality is simply trying to determine what is right and what is wrong, right? So once we decide that okay, there are things like right and wrong, consider them plus one and minus one, right? These two things exist. Then the question comes, all right, then the system of therefore the system is morality or ethics of questioning right and wrong and determining what is right and wrong. Next question is ethical standard, right? What is the theory of ethics? What is the system of ethics? Like how right and wrong form into a system. When we talk about that, we're talking about meta ethics or meta morality. This meta ethics determines what is right and wrong. This also determines that whatever theory or whatever ethical theory of deciding what is right and wrong that you are going to pick, within it, is it absolute? Is it subjective? Or is it a delusion of sorts? A delusion of absolution. What does that mean? So, one stance is moral realism, right? Another stance is moral relativism. And the third stance would be non realism. Now, what the hell does realism mean? Realism means that whatever I'm saying is right and wrong is objectively true. Just like how distance is objectively true or time is objectively true, it is verifiable, right? So, when you believe that whatever system of morality you follow or morality in general can be right or wrong objectively, then your moral system becomes realism. It falls under moral realism. If you are someone or if your moral theory stands in the belief that morality is extremely subjective and it depends on the understanding by different people, right? Morality is such that I can find something right and someone else can find something right and both are equally valid. So I can say that murder is wrong, the other person can say that murder is not wrong, and both of us can be equally valid. If that sort of moral system you believe in, then that moral system comes under moral relativism, right? It's subjective in nature. Then there is a third system which says moral non realism. What that means is that I am going to think murder is wrong to be objectively for the right thing, even though there is no such thing as objectivity. So we believe, or we pretend, or we delude ourselves into believing that there is objective morality when there is none. If that is your belief, if that is the belief of your moral system, then that moral system falls under non-realism. So after you decide whichever of these branches you want to pick, under which you are going to develop your under which you are going to develop your moral theory, then we can start. So let's recap. We started with the question of what is right and wrong. The asking this question is ethics, and this question can either be understood to be objectively correct or objectively wrong, or it can or you can assume it to be always subjective, or you can assume it that we treat it objectively, although it can never really be objective. Right? After you decide that, now you've made rules for whatever moral system that you're going to bring into being, right? Then now we can talk about moral systems. So this comes under normative ethics, right? What are normative ethics? Normative ethics are basically all the different ethical theories that you hear about. This is the definition of ethics, right? The meta ethics decides what ethics are, what they constitute, whatever are their properties, and then you talk about your moral theory. So first comes the definition, then comes the theory. Now the theory could be anything. It could be utilitarianism, right? Or it could be something like deontology, or it could be something like virtue ethics, so on and so forth. Just to give you a brief idea, utilitarianism means that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So if you have to kill one person in order to save 100 lives, then that is morally correct. Right? Deontology says that the action matters. So murder is wrong irrespective of whatever context you're murdering in. Whether you're a soldier, whether you're whatever, murder is still wrong. And so the action itself is objectively wrong or right. Virtue ethics is that you act accordingly to what you understand is going to make you like a better person. So I donate to the needy, to the poor, because to me that increases my virtue. It makes me more moral. So these are a lot more complex than what I described it as, but this is the basic idea of those moral systems. Next up, after you have decided whichever moral system you want to dive into, you go into applied ethics. Now, what are applied ethics? Applied ethics are the ways that you are going to practically implement these ethics, right? So this was the definition of what ethics is, this was the theory of what ethics is, and this was the application of ethics, or the practical nature of ethics. For example, law is applied ethics, right? By the means of imposing laws, you're imposing a ethical system. So law is a example of applied ethics, right? Veganism, the vegan movement, is an example of applied ethics. What else? Religion has its own doctrine, right? Societal norms, right, people do are also a form of applied ethics. So this is essentially all what morality is. To recap, you understand something to be right and something to be wrong, that entire field becomes ethics. Now in order to start that field, you need to define what ethics is, what its properties are, whether it is definitely objective, whether it is completely subjective, whether we delude ourselves to believing it is objective subjective. After you do that, you've defined everything about right and wrong, all of its properties, then you make up a normative theory of ethical standard, in which you basically give a theory of ethics, right? How it happens in the world, how do you go about prescribing it? And once you have given a theory, finally you come into applied ethics, and now that you have an ethical standard, an ethical model, a theory, you apply it practically by the means of law, by the means of activism, by the means of social rules and such, community rules, tradition, right? This is all what ethics is about. Now, when we commonly talk about ethics, normally we talk mostly about normative ethics, because we're more concerned with the whole theory of how right and wrong come about, what is the system, and all of that, right? People don't necessarily talk about meta ethics a lot, which I think is a shame, because I believe until and unless you're clear on what your meta stance is on ethics, what do you understand to be right and wrong, how can you go on to determine a theory of what is right and wrong? And definitely you cannot go into how you should go about it, right? Applied ethics should not even be a concern of yours. Okay, let's see. We have certain people. Hello, postmortem. Hello, Namaskar. Hello, everyone. So, I just wanted to give a cheat sheet on ethics and at least how I understand it. So, I've done that. If you guys want to know my thoughts on certain ethical theories that I might have heard of, I can give you that. But the purpose of this live stream is more or less done. So basically, it's definition, theory, application. Precisely. Antinatalism. Yeah. Antinatalism is comes under normative ethics, right? It's like it decides that it is wrong or right. And then the kind of laws that you will make, or the kind of activism that you will do to promote antinatalism, will end up being the applied ethics of it. Okay. Oh. Now that it's I can get into some of the. Okay. I said that as an example when you were talking about applied ethics, because it can come as an application of certain systems. Yes. But it is itself an ethical stance rather than an application. An application would be how you would go about it on the ground, right? But sure, I mean, veganism comes under applied ethics, so I guess antinatalism could be derived from a pre-established ethical system. That is there. Hmm. Fun. A fun thing recently is that there are different theories for descriptive ethics, and then there is prescriptive ethics. And if your theory can bridge the gap between the two of them, then it will probably be a complete ethical system, right? I was discussing with someone, and this discussion will come in, I think, the third or fourth episode of the Apex Arena, in which I think we came up with emotive. He came up with that. I elaborated on it. It's basically emotive contractualism, right? The origin of what you feel is right and wrong comes from within your emotions, and then the way that you enact that onto the world, and the way that you should be enacting that onto the world, is by contractualism, which is basically you use your reasoning capacity to achieve your goals. So you take reasonable decisions for your goals, and your, again, those goals again are motivated by your own emotional understanding of what is right and wrong. So both of those gel together perfectly to what I believe is the ethical system which is most accurate to reality and works. What is antinatalism? So, Misaki-chan, antinatalism is the belief that you should not have kids, right? There should not be any more children. So the understanding or the stance is that the possibility of suffering within this world occurs only after birth, right? If you are not born, you cannot suffer. Life will throw some form of suffering at you, be it direct pain, be it psychological pain, whatever. So the only way to avoid or end all suffering for all living beings is to stop reproducing completely. If no one is born, no one can suffer. That is the antinatalism stance. So they promote for people to stop reproducing altogether. Huh. I wonder if suffering, if veganism is trying to make it so that suffering shouldn't exist, does that mean that if we take it far enough, it'll the logic will eventually come under antinatalism also? It does appear to be so. But yeah, that's fun. Deontology is quite fun. So deontology is basically the belief that there is either right or wrong, yes, and it's objective. And the way that you verify what is right and wrong, the way that you sort actions into right and wrong, is take that action and imagine if everyone in the entire world was doing it. For example, murder, right? If everyone in the entire world was doing it, do you by your own reasoning believe that is a world that is good, or is that how society should be? If your answer is no, then that becomes wrong. If your answer is yes, then that becomes right. Right? So if you assume that everyone in the world is working very hard, or is very scholarly, everyone in the world wants to read a lot. If you think, oh, that is a right thing to do for society as a whole, then reading would be a morally right action. I literally saw a post today. All vegans should be antinatalist, and I never had disagreed more. Law. Huh? How come? I mean, I don't think it's a matter of should be. I think the logic of trying to minimize suffering does, in its most extreme form, become a form of antinatalism, right? If your motivation is to, let's say, end or reduce all suffering, right? As much as possible also means the possibility of 100%. And the possibility of 100% can only exist if all life ends, I guess. So it does fall into antinatalism. If that is the only stance. If it is to promote a better society, then perhaps not, but then you're smuggling in certain other stances within it. I mean, practically speaking, veganism is simply do not eat or exploit animals, but it needs to have a philosophical or ethical stance at least. Yeah, that's a weird take. One can come to vegan position without trying to eliminate sentient life. Definitely. I think it's not that you become a vegan because you want to eliminate sentient life. You become a vegan because you want to reduce suffering or at least eliminate suffering. And so you start off by reducing the what you understand to be the most unnecessary form of suffering, which is killing animals. Why do you want to eat animals if you have other food available? I think that is the thing. But if we lock onto the position that we want to reduce or end all suffering, then it the next step, what happens after you stop killing animals? You will try and find a way to uh, stop killing plants or at least other sentient beings also in other ways, right? As less of suffering as you can create. And logically, just taking that stance purely to end all suffering will ultimately over time lead into antinatalism. So if veganism, for example, has certain breaks for that, if there are certain caveats introduced which say that okay, to reduce or end all suffering under XYZ condition, then I think it is consistent. Otherwise the logic will end up slowly shifting away to that, the slippery slope fallacy of sorts. That caveat is sentience. So sentience should exist, more or less. That suffering shouldn't exist, but sentience should exist. Is that it? Or is it suffering for sentient beings should not exist? The wording is going to change how you end up going about it. Slippery slope is a fallacy, so vegan shouldn't go to slippery slope. Yeah, sure. I mean, the point is, it depends on how strongly you stick to a certain stance, right? uh, if your goal is truly, truly motivated by ending all suffering, and that is the only axiom, then it will end up becoming antinatalism in some form, until and unless you have like a manifesto in which that is derailed. Okay, so as far as this does not fall into antinatalism. Sentient suffering from for sentient beings should be minimized. Suffering for sentient beings would exist as so far as sentience does exist, right? I mean, that is the entire anti-natalist argument, because they are also trying to eliminate suffering. So they say that the way, if the way that you go about eliminating suffering for all future children is to not have future children. That is their logic, right? It's always going to have some negative effects the moment you start existing, so you remove existence. And I mean, if people base their entire life around that philosophy, I think it probably has a more detailed description and more detailed arguments. But I can see where they're coming from. I'm not trying to eliminate suffering. Context should be checked. So, if you're not trying to eliminate suffering, are you simply trying to reduce suffering? And if you're trying to reduce suffering, would that not mean that suffering is a thing that you're trying to suffering is a bad thing that shouldn't exist, even if you're just simply trying to reduce it? The suffering argument is always annoying. I mean, every culture ends up falling into the suffering argument one way or the other, right? Even religion. So Christians and Abrahamics, they want to eliminate suffering. So their understanding is that you go into God's kingdom, and that is a place where there is no suffering. And more Eastern faiths, they believe that life itself is suffering. So you detach from your self identity, and you attain an enlightened state where you gain complete understanding that you are not yourself but the world, and then suffering will stop. Hell, because they have a conception of rebirth, they also believe that when you stop being born again and again is when suffering will ultimately stop. So they, even Buddhist idea of, or even Hindu idea of what true peace or true fulfillment or the best state is, is a state of non-existence, I guess. Okay, I'd say the suffering can be compensated so as long as joy of amount of, so as long as joy fulfillment amount of to the individual can be created. Example, if I go to gym but makes me feel better. Okay, I got it. So you're taking suffering less of something that you absolutely need to eliminate, but suffering as like a negative number, and happiness as a positive number. So you're trying to make it so your net balance is not negative but rather positive, right? So you have more, if you have more happiness than you have suffering, so that is a life fulfilled. I think I can understand that. Quantifiably, that makes sense. I don't usually use suffering as the standard, though. I'm just adjusting for the conversation about antinatalism. Okay, got it. So, something else entirely. Yeah, I guess if it's not suffering, then for the vegan stance, would it be sentience itself, right? That you're trying to preserve as many consciousness as possible? Is that it? Okay, what's that? Minimize to what level? If you are truly minimizing suffering, doesn't that remove suffering completely, hence eliminating him? Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if you minimize something, you're trying to reduce it, which is again a smaller form of eliminating it, right? You're not completely doing it, but you're working towards it. That is the end goal. Let's think of this quantifiability argument, right? So if there is more happiness, then there is what do you call negative experiences or suffering, then that is a life fulfilled. Why then would you say philosophies like Sanatan Dharma or philosophies like Hinduism, they did not promote actions for a more happy life? Rather, their philosophies are all based on the fact that life itself or living in this particular universe itself is bad or causes suffering. Simply the existence itself is suffering. That is something that even they agreed upon. Why do you think that is? Why did they not go about increasing positivity or positive happy experiences and reducing negative experiences? Okay, let's see. No, we shouldn't increase sentience for the sake of increasing sentience law. So not increasing sentience but preserving sentience then. So how many sentences are you trying to make it so less of them disappear from the world? The rate of reduction decreases? What is it? And anyway, I mean, hell, even in Buddhist experience and Hindu experience, even positive experiences are seen as not good, even though they are positive. There is a thing within Hinduism called pap, and then there is a thing called punya. Pap is sin, and punya is virtue. So every time you do a virtuous act, you get a positive balance of karma, a positive karma of sorts, and every time you do a bad act, a sinful act, you get a negative balance of karma. When you die, you have to pay off both of them. So they don't even want to pay off the positive karma, right? They want to be in a state of zero karma so that they can completely stop existing in a sense. If you have a negative karma, then you will have to go and be in a form of hell or suffering. When you have a positive karma, you will have to go to a more divine realm, and then you will have to. See, the thing is, they think it is that you have to live there and be in luxury. That is also considered a form of suffering, because it is all maya or illusion, and ultimately truth is that there is no self. Don't tell me everyone wants to be happy. I don't know. Okay. Don't tell me they want just everyone to be happy. Would you search? I think trying to increase mass happiness is a bad goal. Yeah, I think it is a bad goal simply because happiness shouldn't be a metric in life at all, right? It's subjective per se, and I don't know. It's a very happiness isn't happiness is a byproduct of what we understand to be positive things happening to us. So it comes out of a self identity that I am, and b something good happened to me, right? But then there is the, I mean, even in the material existence, there is the concept of the hedonic treadmill. So no matter how much good you get, you still desire more. You still desire more. You can say that having more happiness leads to an insatiable desire for more happiness, and that itself is a form of suffering, which is why increasing happiness is a means to no end. Like it has no goal, it has no end point, and it is causing more suffering because that develops a even greater desire or greater addiction to want to get more happiness, right? There is no satisfaction. If all of us had a satisfaction meter of what is maximum happiness, maybe then we can strive for happiness. But even then, what would be the point of it? You will desire more is it's not a fallacy because it is a provable biological concept of the hedonic treadmill. It happens across all phases in life. No matter what you do, the hedonic treadmill concept is seen. The brain adapts, you want more. Everywhere. Be it watching great movies, be it eating great foods, be it having amazing sex, be it, what do you call be it anything, right? Any good thing, you desire more. Hell, that is the reason all of these elites want more and more and more money. What do they want that money for? They already have everything in the world. If you have, let's say, $5 billion, what the hell do you want next? Why would you want the $6th billion? Because it's a hedonic treadmill. No matter how much you get, the human brain or the human psyche is a black hole of wanting more and more. It's a seen and provable concept. Like by example, it is provable, and I think there's a whole biological element to this. The hedonic treadmill is very real, and hence it's not a fallacy at all here. The slippery slope is quite honestly very real here. Do you like want a paper or such in the hedonic treadmill one? You're talking about it like it's. But nah, Google it right now, mate. Okay, let me just Google it. Fuck it. Hedonic treadmill. Biological basis. Dopamine desensitization happens, balancing neurochemicals happens in the brain. There are studies showing a happiness set point. It's a genetic influence apparently. Personality traits are also there. There is evolutionary basis also. Survival oriented motivation. Resilience on hardship, focusing on novel stimuli. There might be many papers in that also, I guess. Let's see if Psychology Today has any particular studies it's referring to. Studies. Science Direct has it. Running on hedonic treadmill, a dynamic model. Accept all cookies. Publications. A new era. Maybe I'll have to do a Google. I do see like across the board there are a lot of information, so they don't see at least a. How would you like make a study out of it? Like what experiment will you run? Let me see. Scholar.google.com. Nina someone and Steve Byron's like 2005. Okay, there are studies. So 1996 study is there. They have quoted other studies also. 1988 study. Yeah, so it at least has a lot of studies. Cool. Yeah. It's conjecture though, it's a hypothesis. Sure. Well, yeah, I did say joy and fulfillment. Fulfillment isn't contingent on joy. The world limit too restricted to take it out. Okay. Maximization of subjective happiness of individuals as a goal may be fine, but as the thing you increase is bad. Think of a person who's tortured for the country. Yeah, I think it's a naive goal, at least. Okay, maybe not as a goal, it's not bad, it's a naive endpoint. If you're trying to create a society with unlimited form of happiness, that's Candyland, right? That's fine when your conception of good and bad is quite kiddish. I don't know. This is quite frankly very childish. Okay. I think happiness is okay. Maximization of subjective hypothesis. Okay, fine. I think happiness is relative as long as there is a difference in happiness of people who actually exist. Since it's subjective, people will be unhappy relative to someone's happiness. A quick hypothetical. So, let's say we develop a technology to mind hack everyone in society, and we can basically tie everyone's bodies into a machine, like a matrix kind of simulation in which they are going to be happy, but it's not going to be real. And they're just simply going to feel happiness. They whatever you put them through, even whether it is torture, whether it is staying in the machine, whether it is making them work endless hours, they are going to perceive everything as the maximum amount of happiness. Would that be a society to aim towards? Because I think we'll sooner create ways to hack our brains than we'll create ways to actually change everything around us. Why not? This is the same moral conundrum in Naruto, actually. The main villain of this entire story. He thinks the world is full of suffering, so he basically starts a war, the end goal of which was to do a particular ritual which causes everyone in the world to be get caught in a, like, what do you call, a bandage like thing. They will stay alive, but they will be in an illusion of whatever they imagine is their best life, and they will think that reality is real. So why was he a villain? That is a question, right? Hello, Megatrace. Yeah, I mean, the point is beyond our own selves. Happiness is problematic because it is subjective, I guess, right? Because it is subjective to the individual, it is problematic, and because it is so easily malleable and it is so easily exploitable, that it is not our understanding of a better society. Okay. Hacking the brain would lead to happiness. Nobody said the goal should be achieved one way. Yeah, I'm simply asking you whether hacking the brain and then getting happiness that way will be the right goal. Okay. The goal is fine, but maximize that, because theoretically you can go quite far to help people. For example, have you read The Life? Okay. Why something subjective? I'm not saying something subjective is necessarily bad. The philosophical idea is subjectivism itself is necessarily bad, if that makes sense, because subjectivity demands that you understand the world through your own particular lens. Therefore, you believe in the existence of your own lens, which is itself falsifiable. And I mean, at least within my moral framework, Vedanta, anything that promotes you towards individual ego is wrong. But that's my thing. I think intuitively itself, if you're declining a society in which you're basically put into a matrix, uh, there is some merit to that discussion. Why is that? Why does that appear wrong to us? The goal is for everyone to be happy. Subjectivity can be verified with others, it's still subjective. Obviously, right? It's the empirical boundary of perception, because our perception is ultimately bound by our five senses. We can't necessarily go beyond to whatever reality is not filtered through them, so it is in a sense subjective. And even if I see this bottle and you see this bottle and all the other viewers are seeing this bottle, does not mean this bottle necessarily exists. It could just be a shared hallucination. I understand that point. Because there are people like me who think happiness isn't everything, and indulging in my desires endlessly to be happy is just utter bullshit. Yeah, I mean, there is a reason all the different religions which are talking about cosmology and they're trying to get into a metaphysical understanding of the world, they end up going towards order, right? I think that is a thing that happens across all systems, all ethical systems also. It's every time it is about order in rather than happiness or sense perception. That is the reason indulgence itself is seen as a bad thing, I think, even outside of religion. Because for religion, maybe you can make the argument that they're trying to control your life, and of course, they're not going to promote happiness because maybe your happiness collides with whatever they are trying to teach. But what about philosophies and such? Why do they? Why was Nietzsche preaching against hedonism? Right? I think, yeah. What your then philosophical stance would be hedonism, because if you're trying to maximize pleasure, then you're a hedonist, right? And you can really only be a hedonist if you believe there is no absolute universal truth. Because I think hedonism stems from nihilism. Okay. You said you wanted to maximize for it, but it's fine to approach general vicinity, but not maximize for it. Maximization is mathematical, not even possible. Yeah, definitely. I think we're steering society in directions we believe is right without ever having decided what even is right properly. Right? We're trying to discuss ethics, but what we really should be talking about are the meta ethics. What even is right, what even is wrong, how do you define it? Until and unless we have that conversation, we cannot have a conversation of ethical systems, and we definitely cannot have a conversation of applied ethics. It's a fool's errand. Anyway, this was fun. If you guys want to ask something, just do it now because I'm going to go soon. Promoting more middle class people and removing poverty altogether. But again, poverty is relative to. Yeah, everything is relative. That's not the point. We barely understand what is. So it's definitely hard to understand what ought to be. Okay, 2:26. Maybe I can do a little longer. 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever minutes. I think it's always much easier to have a predefined ethical standard and simply defer to it. That is the reason people often fall into religion or the doctrine set by whatever government or ruling body is there, whether it's a king or whatever. But these questions are important, right? If I can't even understand what is right and what is wrong, how the hell am I supposed to understand how to make an ethical system of deciding what is right and wrong? And definitely I cannot understand then uh, how to mold society in a certain way. I think that was about it. Thank you everyone for attending. This was a fun short live. It ended up being a lot longer than I was expecting. I just wanted to get this understanding of ethics that I had just out there. And I hope you liked it. See you all soon. The next episode of Apex Arena will also come shortly if I'm able to edit it on time. And I might do a collab with a creator. Let's see. Okay. See ya. Have a good one. And before you go, remember one thing: think, analyze, and critically examine everything, even yourself, even your own beliefs. Because everything has patterns. Why? Because patterns, they're everywhere.